Welcome to this episode of the Good Grief Believer podcast. I'm the host, Julie Craig, and I'm really excited to meet today with Dr. Nicholas Dogris and Dr. Tiff Thompson, who are with Neurofield Neurotherapy in Santa Barbara, California. They've been doing really cutting edge work as far as the brain, and I am really happy to have them share with us what they've learned, and we will talk about how that might have implications for people who are suffering through grief. So thank you so much, Dr. Dogris and Dr. Thompson, for being here. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate you having us.
So you can decide who to start, but would you both just give a little bit about your background, about yourselves, so that we can get to know you a little bit?
Sure.
Ladies first.
I was going to say age before. No, because my husband, so we get to tease each other. But that's a very important caveat for anybody listening to this show, that he's my husband. And so, we play off each other a little bit. I ran a practice in Santa Barbara, California, along with Nick, called Neurofield Neurotherapy. I'm a marriage and family therapist, quantitative EEG diplomat, a registered EEG technician, board certified in neurotherapy, blah, blah, blah. All that is to say is I'm someone that's really interested in the brain and the mind, right? And so interested that we developed an online educational platform called the School of Neurotherapy, where we teach budding neurotherapists and really, very fully launched and advanced neurotherapists how to do what we do, right? And so that's my intro in a nutshell, and I'll hand it over to Nick.
I'm a psychologist and licensed in the state of California, board certified in EEG and in neurotherapy. I am married to Tiff. We have 2 children. We've been working together now for how many years? Has it been 7?
We've been together since a decade, 9 years. And 2 years, a decade and a half, decade and 12 years.
But at the clinic though.
Since 2017, we've been here together.
Yeah. And so we have the clinic, Neurofield Neurotherapy. We have the School of Neurotherapy, as Tiff mentioned. And we also have Neurofield itself, which is a hardware, software manufacturing company that develops devices like electroencephalographs to measure the brain, and stimulation devices like the Genesis, which is a cranial stimulator, and the Photon, which is a photobiomodulation device. So we have these really cool little widgets that are drug-free and non-invasive and safe to use, that we market and sell, and we practice with.
And we train people to use. That's right.
Mm-hmm. You are very, very involved in this field.
Oh yeah. I've been in the field for 35 years.
So
I started.
Yeah, please tell me how you started. What got you interested in this?
So I started in. I was originally I got my master's degree in research psychology, and with an emphasis in neurophysiology. And so I was really interested in the brain. Back in 1988, while at university, I studied EEG and would end up, doing some research there. I wanted to be a NASA psychologist, but that I didn't, want to go into the military. So that changed course. And I ended up going and getting another master's degree in clinical psychologist and a PhD in health psychology. During that time, I met Margaret Ayers. She was the one who got me started in neurofeedback. She developed one of the first real-time EEG devices in the United States. Go down in history as the mother of neurotherapy, or neurofeedback rather. And it's really a cool experience. I watched her take a person out of a coma at UCLA Medical Center in 1990. And it just blew my mind, because everything I had learned up to that point in time was that the brain would be damaged and wouldn't be able to repair itself. And it turned out that was completely wrong. And she pleasantly informed me that everything I knew was wrong. And that just basically changed my entire track. I ended up going headlong into this field and never look back.
Wow. That's fascinating, and a fascinating experience to find that all this time you've been spending learning, there was a correction to be made, right? There's something
there's always I think one of the it's a humbling field to be in, because the brain is some of the most complex noise in the known universe, and we're learning something new all the time. It never stops, and I've spent over 20 years examining the brain and coming up with ways of looking at it and making software and making hardware. And just when I think that we're there, all of a sudden a new thing presents itself, and it's now we're making something else, and constantly innovating and generating. That's what we do.
That's
because there's so much to learn. Yeah,
it's so exciting, and especially because I'm so interested in this field of grief and grieving well and helping people, that I'm enthusiastic for the possibilities that some of what you have learned and what you do could help somebody who's severely grieving. Some people grieve in such a severe way that they can't function at all. And then there are others whose living grief leads them to, the most tragic outcome, where they end their lives because whatever they're dealing with is so hard to deal with.
The
implications for health and wellness for people like that is just amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Complex grief is a real deal, and I don't know if people really know how to grieve, when they sustain really significant loss in their life. Every culture has a different way of dealing with death and loss and stuff like that. But what we do know is that when you get hit with something that is of sufficient intensity to really make you grieve, it's going to impact your brain. Both Tiff and I have seen it in our patients, and we've treated it in various ways using the technology we have, along with the psychotherapies that we're both trained in. And so it's a big deal.
Yes, thank you. So Tiff, where did your journey start with this?
I also had a 90-degree turn happen. So I went straight out of my bachelor's degree into a master's degree, and I thought I was going to be a politician.
Okay.
I was studying political rhetoric, and anyway, wound up actually developing wind farms. So there's a long story, but the short of it is that I decided that I'd gotten the wrong master's degree, and I thought I got to get another job. And I was a huge environmentalist. And so I moved to the environmental community, in professional community. And I also looked at counseling psychology degrees. I thought maybe I'll get another degree. I don't know, maybe I'll go into this field. And so both things took. And I spent the next 5 years as a wind energy developer developing wind farms, which was pleasing to my ego. But the truth of the matter is I was missing a chip. I wasn't excellent at it. I was okay. I was mediocre. And I'd happened to get this counseling degree that I didn't think I was going to end up using. And then I found what was at that time neurofeedback in Hawaii in 2011. And my whole life changed in a day. And I came back to Santa Barbara from Hawaii, and I said, I gotta figure out what this thing is. I've got to start to try to use it and do it. And I'm going to use that master's degree. And anyway, I ended up moving forward, quit my wind energy career, moved into someone's clinical practice as their intern, got all of my clinical hours, got a license, went into my PhD, all the while doing neurofeedback. And what happened in my practice was I found that my results were kind of lackluster. They were mediocre, particularly in this one person's practice while he was my supervisor. I remember saying to him at one point, I just don't think this stuff works. And he was like, ugh, So then I kind of popped out and went out on my own and just ran into Nick's equipment first. I ended up buying some of his equipment and attending a training that he held. We weren't together at that point. And it started to change people. I started to see a change in the clinic, clients that came through my door. They started to get better faster. And that was exciting. And so literally it was the neurofield hardware and software that like kept me in this field. Otherwise I would have aborted mission over a decade ago. And what happened after that was in my PhD, which was in psychology, I was really interested in EEG and analyzing EEG data. And so all of my intellectual pursuits from, I don't know, a decade back have really been around neuroscience and EEG. And as Nick said, the more you know you don't know in this field. So the smarter you get, the dumber you feel. Not quite, but kind of. And if you really feel smart, you're probably pretty dumb. Right?
Oh, no.
But that's sort of the long and short of it, and now we're at this really, really interesting juncture with our three companies combined. We don't know what the future will hold, but we have a lot of ideas about it. I'll just say that much.
That's exciting. That's
super exciting.
So this is really this is an interesting piece that you mentioned Nicholas's equipment, because I went to your website, which is wonderful, and there's some interviews, there's some little snippets, little videos, and I watched one with Nick sharing this story about how he made this equipment, and I wondered if you would share that, Nick, because to me, there are no coincidences. To me, there's just such a larger force working in the universe for good. And what you discovered is obviously just helping so many people, but all these pieces had to come together in the right way.
Well, yeah. I think, you involuntarily get pushed into things. But, I'm happy to tell you about it. My eldest son was born premature and hypoxic. And so it's a deprivation of oxygen at birth. And because he was a preemie, he sustained brain damage as a result of it. And it wasn't severe, but it was significant enough to impact him. He was born in 2002, and having had worked with kids and being in the field for 12 years already, I knew enough to know that I should wait and see how he does after he was born, and just kind of monitor him and, help him along. And we got to about 18 months and he wasn't walking and he spoke like one word, and I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen to him? What's his life going to be like? Is he ever going to be able to take care of himself? And, a lot happened around that, but I was really lucky that I got this inspiration, if not a divine inspiration, to make a frequency generator because I was convinced that there was a way to be able to stimulate an infant's brain really gently. And to help it to start to rehabilitate itself. I knew enough at that time, having had practiced neurofeedback for 12 years, I knew that it was possible to rehabilitate the brain. I knew that the brain would heal itself. I knew that it would do some really miraculous things. It was interesting because I didn't have the engineering chops to make the thing that I needed to make. And so, I had the idea, and I was watching the movie The Secret, and with Reverend Beckwith, and he said, you can manifest anything you want. All you have to do is think about that and wrap that intention with love, and you can make what you want. And I did. I thought about his face, and I thought, and I remember saying, I met a radio frequency engineer, and we make a device and it changes the world. Ha ha ha, and so then, like 2 days later, I'm across the street at this new guy who just happened to move in, and he was a professional guitar player. Brilliant. Amazing guitar player. And so I went there for a lesson. And when my lesson was over, the next guy walks in, and he says, Nick, meet Brad. Brad, meet Nick. And Brad says, what do you do? I said, oh, I'm a psychologist. What do you do? He goes, I'm a radio frequency engineer. And it just drops out of the sky. I know. And I'm like, you know what? It was really interesting. It's like time stopped. It really did. I mean, I remember looking at him, and I'm in my head, I'm having this entire dialogue of, I got to tell him I need a frequency. I got to tell him that. I'm like, this is crazy. He's going to think I'm really that, and I'm going all over the board with it. And then I tell him, and he says, well, okay, that's easy. And he says, what do you think it'll help? I said, I think we can help kids with autism. And he says, I have an autistic son. And and he said, give me a call. And so we met, and 30 days later, we had the first prototype put together. It happened really fast.
That is fast.
And then he built it by hand. And, I mean, if the universe, couldn't have thrown a better person in front of me. Just a salt of the earth, really gentle man with that incredibly intelligent and cradle to grave engineer.
Yeah.
And together we worked diligently, and 6 months later we spun up 10 of the units, and I sent them to different people around the United States that I had known in the field that I trusted to tell me the truth. Mm-hmm. And I said, I have this thing, and I want you to tell me what you think. And one of the people I sent it to was Corridon Hammond. He was one of Milton Erickson's students in clinical hypnosis. Brilliant psychologist out of the University of Utah School of Medicine. And he was my supervisor for my board certifications. And I sent him one, and he was like this real straight-laced guy. I was really nervous to send it to him. And he said, once he got it and he tested it out for a week, he called me up, and he said, this is brilliant. It's amazing. And he said, you have an ethical obligation to release this to the world.
Wow.
You have to. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. I mean, it's such a big lift. I mean, there was so much to have to do
huge.
that.
And how do you finance something like that? I mean, this is a really big thing.
Yeah. I personally financed the project, and we started, it was grassroots. I mean, from the ground up, with nothing. And we built it. And when we built it, there was a whole crew of people that jumped in. Wow. I had been designing software for another company. And so I had a reputation and good credibility clinically. And so when I announced that I had this new thing, and people were really interested in, like, what is this,
Yeah.
And basically, it was a little electromagnetic stimulation device. And the EMF, which is like real healthy EMF, low intensity, was about the intensity level that you would get if you put your head in your refrigerator.
So EMF, is that electromagnetic frequency? Is that what that means?
Yeah. Electromagnetic field.
Field.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have these little coils that emit this really gentle field. Okay. And it's so weak that it won't hurt the body. What it does is it stimulates the body very gently. Okay. And so you could put it up to the head of an infant and stimulate that brain, and it would increase blood flow. Okay. And if you increase the blood flow, then the brain will automatically go to work because it's the best doctor in the room, and it starts to repair itself when it has resources. And that's what happened.
So where have you found this to be? What does this help? What conditions does this seem to help? What are your patients like? That's
the $25,000 question, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah. We are cleared by the FDA for the treatment of chronic insomnia.
Okay.
That's our official designation.
Okay.
We have research only use designations where we've been able to show efficacy in reducing symptoms associated with depression, anxiety, developmental type of disorders like ADHD, substance abuse, OCD,
PTSD, addiction,
opioid dependence, depression.
So not everybody understands how these FDA how it works, right? Where you have where the clinical official is this, but then there are all these things called off-label, right? Where
Right.
it seems to help something else. And a lot of medicines that start or devices that start in one field, because they're so efficacious in something else, they end up getting being used for that.
Well, that's what
Right.
happened in the neurofield community is people, obtained a device and then started using it for different things. And then they started reporting that, oh, by the way, I saw this happen, or this person had this kind of response. And we started, case after case after case, and user after user that joined this community. It became pretty large, and a lot of people started to become very excited that there was a non-drug, non-invasive approach to helping a person to achieve stability and wellness.
Right. That's
And that
ultimately
became
that's the
really
goal.
powerful. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
It was surprising,
It's so exciting. And I was mentioning before, Tiff, that my daughter, when she was 9, did neurotherapy for a sleep disorder. And it helped. It really did help. So I'm a believer in this, and I'm excited about the wider implications of it, of these different things that you were talking about, that you listed. But going back, could you just do a little 101, a little primer on brain waves, what that is, how things are affected in the brain, and how this therapy works?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. Nick, is to you, Sam. So
Yes,
there's healthy and then there's not healthy, right? There's pathological and then there's non-pathological. And so I'm going to touch on healthy to start, right?
Okay.
So get out your pens.
Okay.
So delta is a 1 to 4 hertz range, right? That's where most people start. Beneath delta is something very slow cortical potentials, but delta is 1 to 4 hertz. Delta is seen in deep dreamless sleep in healthy adults. It's also seen in infants, right? It's a frequency that infants inhabit a lot of the time. It's deep unconscious, right? So you don't have much delta going on right now, little itty bitty bits, right? But when you're in your deep dreamless sleep, you're making quite a lot of delta content.
Okay.
Theta is the next frequency range up, which is 4 to 8 hertz. And theta is, it's a very transy quality. Most adults don't make a lot of theta who are healthy. You make theta as you're drowsing, right? And REM too. We start to make theta.
Okay.
And we make a little bit of theta in deep dreamless sleep as well, or when you're under hypnosis, right? But theta is very transy. However, children spend a lot of time in theta.
Okay.
So infants spend a lot of time in delta, but children under the age of 9 spend a lot of time in theta. And so theta is reverie and daydream and trance, but there's a magical quality to theta. And, some amazing things have been reported as of happening in theta. But for children, it's theta that gives rise to the magic of Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy and, that quality of life that is so endemic to youth for most of us, right? When you get into alpha, we're at an 8 to 12 hertz range, with some exception, but I'll keep it at that without getting into the depth of alpha. And normal, natural, healthy alpha is a bit disengaged. But it's awake, right? So if you're not really thinking of anything in particular, let's say you're driving down the road and you're on the same stretch of road for 10 minutes, you're probably hanging out in alpha, not thinking about much. Alpha is like the brain twiddling its thumbs. It's just a disengagement. When people meditate, a lot of folks will go into alpha. When you close your eyes, most people naturally make alpha content. Beta content is active conscious cognitive processing. So all of us right now probably have more beta than anything, and that's 13 to 30 hertz. And then beyond beta is gamma content, and gamma, it arrives in bursts or in chirps. It's chirps. It's 30 hertz plus, and it's aha, right? It's novelty. It's a recognition of something meaningful, novel. And unlike all the other frequencies, gamma doesn't have a generator. So every frequency comes from a different part of the brain, but gamma doesn't. Gamma arrives like a rainbow arrives in the sky when, the sun and the water droplets interact.
Really?
Right? Yeah, gamma is really
interesting.
Right? Yeah. So that's a primer on healthy EEG.
Okay. And then what happens when you have an unhealthy EEG?
So many variations on a theme. Yeah. I mean, delta content, we can see it in white matter damage. So white matter is the stuff beneath the bark of the brain. It's the fibers that connect the deep subcortical structures with the bark. You can see delta content in toxic encephalopathy. You can see excessive delta content and I mean, other kinds of big bad problems. It's not something that you want in someone that's in coma. Theta content, it shows up in lots of things, age-related cognitive decline, as does delta. Strokes, gray matter damage, ADHD, lots of learning disabilities. A lot of learning disabilities will have that slower content in it.
Wow.
There's many, many variations on a theme for all of these different disabilities as well. There's not just one profile for each disability. Alpha can be very heavy, depressive, anhedonic, dysphoric, disengaged, apathetic.
Yeah.
Beta can reflect an inflamed nervous system. There is one beta profile that is an ADHD beta profile, but beta often pairs with high amplitude stress, like stress, anxiety. And then when we get spikes, when, the system becomes unstable, people will enter into panic. Very fast frequencies can be reflective of encephalitis or even psychosis. And so that's just a very brief, quick look at pathological EEG, but it's far, far more complex than that.
Wow. It is hard for me to wrap my brain around all of that. But so then I'm wondering, what do you think is happening in complex grief?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because grief is not fundamentally, it's not a cortical phenomenon. And so what the cortex is the bark of the brain, right? The cortex is the top. It's the most evolved portion of the brain. It's very thin. And it's mentative, right? So when you think, that's cortical mostly, right? But other animals grieve as well, right? And I know that you know stories. The one that stuck with me that I came across a while ago was of a whale that gave birth to a calf that didn't live, and she carried her dead calf in her mouth for a while, right?
Yeah, I remember that
and
story.
It was photographed, and so mammals grieve, mammals love, and mammals grieve. And, the most anterior portion of the old mammalian brain, anterior means front, right? So if you put your fingers right at your third eye and you push back, if you could push back into your brain, you would hit a region called the anterior cingulate cortex and another region called the orbital frontal cortex. Number one, it's key to attachment. Right. So we begin to attach right when we're born, but attachment is a huge process in life. And it's largely the orbital frontal cortex that's implicated in attachment. But then this region of the brain is also tethered to something called the insular cortices. So if you place your fingers on your temples, there's two little pockets of brain tissue called the insula that are right there. And those three spots all together form a network that's tied into psychological suffering. Suffering and pain. And it's the suffering network. It's part of the pain network of the brain. And what's interesting is that it registers psychological pain with the similar intensity that one would physical pain. But what happens with the exercise of this network is that the worse it gets, the worse it gets. So the more one catastrophizes and ruminates and perseverates, a pattern can be worn and woven into the brain.
Right. Like a path, you start through a field, maybe you bend a few grasses, but then if you keep going that path back and forth, pretty soon it's just mud. The grass is gone.
Right.
Okay,
right.
You can do that with your brain thought.
Can happen. So you're on the right track. Absolutely. And then what can happen is that network can begin to connect with what's called the default mode network, because default mode is when we're just chilling, right? Just whatever, being you. But doing what you do.
Yeah.
And so if you're hanging out in that network of suffering, of psychological pain, it will start to tether with your default mode. And default mode is me. Default mode is the sense of self. It's the I. And so these things can link up so that default mode and psychological pain become me.
Wow. So that's where you see this intense, long-term suffering. It's literally become this is who you are. Oh my gosh.
It's like your identity. Yeah. And complex grief really resonates with that. As you were talking about that, Tiff, I remembered a case that of this woman where her brother had tragically committed suicide. And it was like 29 years prior to seeing me. And she had been locked in complex grief for that period of time, never was able to get over this or move through it.
Right.
And when she came in, we got a brain map on her. And as Tiff talked about, the anterior cingulate was operating very slowly. It was locked in this real slow rhythm.
Okay.
And she so dearly wanted to get out of that state, but that's what she was at that point. And in talking with her, I learned that she never really engaged in any form of ceremony after she committed suicide because of the religious beliefs that said that if you committed suicide, you weren't allowed to bury the person in the church or engage in the religious ceremonies that they typically would. Right. And so everything happened in a very sterile way. Right. That was just hurtful to everybody. And they just kind of like shoved it aside and, we're not going to remember this. And she was very, very close to him and locked in that. And I had written a protocol that used cranial stimulation, and it uses a modality called direct current. And there's a way of setting the electrodes on the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, coming out through the right preorbital. These two electrodes on the head, and I gave her this stimulation, and as she received that, we talked about the possibility of engaging in ceremony. Mm-hmm. And so she was really reluctant, and like, that's, it's not okay. And then so finally we got to the point where she was like, well, I think I want to do that. And after doing several of these sessions, she decided that she would plant something for him, and she'd put it in a little planter and put it on her sink every day. She'd go in and look at it, and nothing had sprouted. And finally, she had her own little ceremony with this little planter, and she woke up in the morning, and it was really beautiful. A little sprout had come out.
Oh,
and she brought it in to show. She came and showed me, and she looked completely different. She cried and she wept and she moved through it, but she was, she said, "This is him. I love you, and now I'm letting you go." And it was just so touching. But I watched it because her brain had been stuck literally in this frozen state for over 20 years. And it was remarkable to witness this person break through that and come to the other side of it. And I got to observe it, and I was so moved by this amazing transformation. And she's so sweet about it, and then she brought me the plant and showed me. And I was just, I thought it was beautiful.
You can't understate how remarkable that is. If, to think about a person and what her life must have been day in and day out. Yeah. As she was wearing out that path, to then be released from that.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's really incredible. Beautiful. Wow.
But it's one of the many examples of I think we're blessed and honored to be able to watch people go through these things. I know I feel that way, and I'm pretty sure Tiff feels that way. We get to watch people do these just amazing things, and we get to witness it. And it's almost tragic when you realize that a lot of this stuff gets pushed aside, because people don't know of other ways to be able to heal themselves.
Right.
They go down a path of, taking a medication or trying to just, treat the symptom instead of the real problem.
You see alcoholism, people withdraw Yeah, all kinds of.
Yeah,
But
that's what happens with grief. People, they medicate it away.
right, because you can't see it. If you break your arm, you can put a cast on. You can watch. You can measure progress of getting stronger. It's really hard to comprehend what's going on in the brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how does this process work? I mean, obviously you guys are in Santa Barbara. So somebody who's there local, can come to your clinic. But how does this work for somebody outside?
It's a good question. So, I mean, the good news for that question is that there are hundreds of clinicians that practice neurofield. Mm-hmm. We're in 42 or 47 countries. I can't remember which, but we're all over the world, actually. This is mothership here in Santa Barbara. Okay. And, and so what a lot of folks will do is reach out to us and say, who's in Austin, Texas, or who's in San Francisco. And that's totally expected. And to be honest, some of these folks are really up to speed, and some of them we haven't seen in a decade.
Okay.
And so ideally, you're going to work with somebody who's really up to speed on the latest and the greatest, because we innovate incredibly quickly. But the other answer to that question, if someone's like, yeah, I want to do this, but I want to come to you guys. Well, we work with intensives. That's actually how we do a lot of our work, is intensives. We have a lot of out-of-towners that come into Santa Barbara for 2 weeks. And, we see them every day, usually twice a day. It could be 1 week, it could be 2 weeks. Some people stay for 3 weeks. I would think that complex grief, it's not like the kind of case we would see with TBI, for instance, where it's like, yeah, this is going to take some time. It might,
right.
Can't say, but it should theoretically move a bit faster. And so if people are interested in that, we do sessions called kicking the tires if they just want to poke their head in. But what Nick mentioned and what I mentioned really are the frameworks around how this chronic grief becomes chronic.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. The chronicity of it, especially for someone that's done a ton of psychotherapy. Let's just say that they've pounded the pavement with psychotherapy and they're over it. They just, well, then it's simply the nervous system that needs to be addressed. Right. Then it's time to address the physiology. And what we work with electricity, and we work with the brain's electricity and the electrochemical potentials of the brain. And so,
it's a good point that you make, because one of the surprising things when people experience very, very traumatic grief situations, any kind of grief, they are usually surprised at how physically taxing it is. Grief is actually a physical experience, and you don't think of it that way. You think of it about maybe something you just think about and it makes you sad. But people who've experienced loss, and not just from death, all kinds of life-altering losses, their health declines, they don't sleep well, they physically have more pain, they can't move as easily. So you're saying after addressing all of the psychosocial aspects, there might be a physiological piece. Yet.
Really guaranteed there's a physiological piece. And if you think about the way the nervous system works, so the nervous system is the brain stem, and the cerebellum, and then the peripheral nerves, right? And so down your vertebrae runs your spinal cord, and then out of the vertebrae come all of the peripheral nerves. And the peripheral nerves obviously feed your entire body, right? So they feel achy, they feel pain, they feel fatigue, they feel all of this is nervous system. You know what I mean? And absolutely there's a process going on. There's not just, is there a physical process, there's a spiritual process, there's an emotional process. It's a tremendous lift for the human,
So tell me what happens when, say I'm going to come and do an intensive. What does that look like? What happens in the clinic?
Yeah. So you would walk in and start out with, meet either Nick or myself, right? But then you would get an EEG and an ERP. So we'd get 20 minutes of brain data, and then we'd get 20 more minutes of watching your brain under task. And we do a very—
What is ERP? I think I know EEG. I've heard of that, but what is ERP?
Yeah, it's event-related potentials.
Okay.
Yep, event-related potentials. And so what we're doing is we're watching how your brain responds to stimuli.
Okay.
Yeah, and that can be telling. So, I would think that somebody with a chronic grief would have a delayed reactivity, a delayed response, literally a depressed response.
Right.
So we'll measure your system in lots of different ways. We'll look at your cognitive, do a quick cognitive exam as well. So there's a little bit of a battery in the very beginning, and then Nick and I will go home, write the report, usually early in the morning for me, or late at night for Nick. and then we present our findings, which is the blueprint. That's the telltale.
Yeah.
This is the map of what's going on, and it tells us what to do. And so because he and I have been doing this for so long, and because it's, 90 some odd % of what we do, and we do it all day, it's like a chunk of brain that we have dedicated to this task. And so he and I can look at that, and many neurofield clinicians as well, and say, with this pattern and this profile, your system is going to want this, and this, and it's going to want it here, and here. This is how we're going to do it. This is how long we're going to do it. This is the strength we're going to do it at. We're going to remeasure you in 10 sessions, which is essentially sitting in a chair with electrodes and other apparatus on your head.
Is it like a cap? Is it?
Yeah, there's a cap, and and so it's a multimodal neurostimulation technique.
Okay.
But
it doesn't hurt, right? It
doesn't hurt. No, but it is palpable. You can feel it.
You can feel it. Okay.
People call it prickly or tingly or ticklish or you can feel it, and actually, people really like that.
Yeah,
they like that you can feel it. Yeah.
Okay.
People can have a response really quickly with this technology too.
Yeah, it's not, but it is a cumulative build.
Yeah.
Right. So we like to see something. It can happen in session number 1, and it certainly does, but we need to see it before session 5. That's what we're always getting and gunning for. And then the sessions build, just like you're going to the gym, right? And you're building your biceps, you're building your biceps, you're building your biceps. And so that's why we like to work intensively, because we can break down the deviant patterns, and B, supplant them with the new patterns, right? With the new ways of being. So that old locked in thing is gone.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a data informed assessment.
Yeah.
So, we're taking a real hard look at you.
Yeah.
And then we're using these computational neuroscience tools that were developed at UC San Diego, the Schwartz Center for Computational Neuroscience. And we're using them in a clinical sense. And we're bridging the gap between, academic neuroscience and clinical application.
Right.
And so we take, your complaint, your presentation, and we match it to this data. And we get really specific about what parts of the brain are not doing what they're supposed to. Right. And then once we have that information, then we can use a very targeted system to be able to gently help the brain to balance itself, to rehabilitate. Right. And so, and when you use energy the way we're using it, it's really low level. You can feel it. And the brain will start to replicate what we show it.
That's
so
amazing.
We start to show it the correct frequency, and all of a sudden it starts to do it. And very much like repeating a task over and over again, eventually it learns it and trains to it. And so that's why we do intensive, so that we can. It's like going to the gym twice a day with a personal trainer, and you do that for a week, and now you're going to rehab.
So then, are you pretty tired after? I mean, is it tiring?
Yeah. I mean, fatigue is one of the most common side effects.
Because you're doing a lot of work.
Exactly.
Right? The brain is doing a lot of work.
Burning up a lot of glucose. That's absolutely right. Glutamate. So now what's common, and we tell folks is, you might crash hard tonight. You might go to bed at like 9, be like wiped. Some people get good, long, hard sleeps. A lot of people really like that. And in cases of head injury, which we're not talking about, a lot of times there's going to be even more sleep, right? Because their system is going down to repair or to heal. But I personally always think it's a great thing when someone comes in and they say, oh my gosh, I slept from like 8 p.m. until 8 a.m. I'm like, good. Your system really needed that.
Yeah.
That's your natural reparative, restorative system at work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I would compare early grief to was when I had a baby. If I was talking to somebody who had just lost someone, I'd say, when somebody has a baby, nobody expects them to do anything for weeks, right? It's like your whole job is to keep that baby alive. You sleep. So don't expect anything of yourself. Don't let anyone expect anything of you. It's.
I love that. That's actually great.
Right.
That's great. You're right.
You can use that.
I'm going to.
I just put that in my pocket.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this question. Have you found a trend is there a hardest type of patient to treat or a hardest condition to treat?
I mean, I can say that the more challenging cases are autism spectrum disorder 3.
Okay.
Which is really developmentally challenged.
Okay.
Alzheimer's, that's pretty far gone.
Okay.
And then traumatic brain injury.
Okay.
Bad TBI.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that just take a long time and you don't know how far you're going to get.
Do you think it's because there's more physical damage to the brain?
Totally. Yeah. It's because the brain is altered profoundly in all 3 of those cases. Yeah.
Yeah. There comes a point where there's a point of no return at one, where, it's just not going to change.
But the good news about that, at least for your audience, is that, mental health issues, things like grief, which does fall into mental health, that's well within our wheelhouse. That's stuff that actually does, it moves surprisingly fast. It's just dislodging. Well, I shouldn't say it's just dislodging a deviant network. It's much more than that. It's going to be unique to each person, but it's not the same as TBI.
Well, I'm really hoping that this opens up a conversation for people who, honestly, it's probably more a loved one who encourages someone to get treatment for complex grief, because I think the person themselves is probably not capable of making that decision because the grief is so debilitating. But I don't think it's usually covered by insurance. Is that right?
Some practitioners bill. We have tried, and you win some, you lose some.
Oh, I get it.
Nowadays we don't bill insurance, but we'll give super bills. So we'll help.
Right. And so somebody could come to you, submit it to their insurance company, or to a practitioner who does the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if a practitioner weaves in psychotherapy with every session, which some do, then you could bill for psychotherapy. There's ways around this, but we're getting into the maze of insurance, which is an unfortunate one.
It is unfortunate. We will know that we've solved the problem when the insurance companies are finally crying.
Right. Dawning of enlightenment. Yes.
I think they're starting to get it. At least the beginning of that little spark has happened. Yeah. Because I think what they're starting to realize, we had an audit at this one facility that I work at in Florida, and what they realized was that the recidivism rate of their patients, 1,000 patients, was 3.9%.
This is a rehab center.
And they went, oh my God! And then they realized that they had made substantially more money because the patients weren't utilizing their insurance.
The services. That's amazing.
And it was all about flipping that for them and letting them see through real data and saying,
right.
This actually did work for you guys, and you're welcome.
I love that.
And let's keep that going.
Let's do.
That conversation is ongoing.
That's fantastic. That is so great. This has been such a great conversation. I've really, really enjoyed hearing from both of you. You're brilliant. You're compassionate. I love what you've dedicated your lives to doing. And how wonderful you get to do it together. You're just just wonderful.
Yeah, thank you for the compliment, and thanks for the invitation. Thanks for finding us, and we are lucky to work together, and we know that about 95% of the time.
That's right. You're still real, right? Is there that we didn't cover that you think is important to?
Well, the only piece that may be interesting to any of your people listening is if there's any mental health care clinicians that listen to your show and they're interested in this. We teach like almost every day of the week. We have so many different courses and seminars. We have an annual conference. And so if anybody is interested in learning how to do what we do, that's another thing that we do is we teach how to do what we do. And it's really powerful, very exciting, definitely moves the needle.
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Tiff is an expert, and she has formulated these amazing classes. The School of Neurotherapy contains this wealth of information that has really, grown because of Tiff's efforts.
Nice.
And it's something that if you're new and you want to come into this field, this is the place to start, because she sat down and went, what would be really nice? What would I have wanted to hear when I started, or I wish somebody had taught me?
Yeah.
And then formulated all this stuff around it.
Yes.
And it's brilliant. So
that's
for people out there that want to learn, for sure, that's the portal of entry.
I love that. So then how do they get a hold of you? What's the best way to do that?
Well, I mean, people can certainly email me, which is my name, Tiff Thompson @gmail, just how you think it would be spelled. But then, the School of Neurotherapy, the website, which is School of Neurotherapy, has a wealth of information, and it's a place to look as well. Yeah.
School of Neurotherapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then Neurofield Neurotherapy as well.
Okay.
For the clinic. And then neurofield.com for the hardware company.
That's great.
And then for me, it's Dr. Dogris at neurofield.com.
Okay. You guys have been so generous with your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having us.
And this is a podcast about grief. So the last question I ask every guest is, what do you think it means to grieve well? And I'll hand that over to both of you.
I'll go first. Nick will probably have to, So, well, I get to see your answer taking longer. So I feel like grief is wizening, right? It's wizening and it's deepening. And some of my biggest lessons in life have been around grief, and, probably grief that pales in comparison to, some real traumatic grief. But all said, who I wouldn't be with it today. And I feel like there's a depth that's afforded to us with grief, and we're actually closer to God, whatever you consider it to be, source. I think we're closest to source in those moments of deep, 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 deep despair. It's hard to see, but when you're on the other side of it, you realize how connected you were. Yeah.
Thank you.
What is it to grieve? What an interesting
to grieve
question.
Well.
To grieve well, yeah. When I was a child, my mother took my brother and sister and I to Greece to caretake a woman that was passing. And this woman was responsible for helping my mother during World War II when the Germans had decimated the village, and she was left for dead. She was like 6 years old. And this woman took her in and raised her and helped her to get to America. And so when she was dying, my mom said, I want to take care of her. I want to shepherd her to her death. And so we went, and we lived in this little village, and she passed. And when she passed, she was dressed and cleaned and put on the couch where she sat there. And for 3 days, people came in from all over the village and sat with her and cried and brought presents. And they talked to her. And I watched all these people some people were mad and some people were happy and some people were crying. And I'm 5 years old and I'm just standing there going, I don't understand any of this, And then my cousin, who's an adult, says, come on, we're going to go dig the hole. And I said, okay. And so we go to the village cemetery and we're sitting there and he starts digging and I'm terrified. He's digging a hole, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, it's a large plot and you hear ding with the shovel and there's a bone. And I'm like
Whoa.
beside myself at this point. And he picks
Yeah.
up and he's joking. He said, this was so-and-so. And he set to the side and he
Like a
keeps on
horror
digging.
movie.
And he hits another bone and he holds it up and goes, this was so-and-so. And I'm like, ah. And and he looked at me and he said, what are you scared of? What are you scared of? You live and you die. And I was standing there and he goes, you're going to go back to the earth one day and it's okay. And it was so weird. I remember walking back to the village and when they buried her, they threw a party and these folks drew down and they ate and they drank and they laughed and they cried and they celebrated her life in every possible way. So to me, that's what grieving well is.
I love that. Oh, if we could all do it like Greece.
Well,
Wow.
the Greeks, I tell you.
There we go. Well, thank you so much. I love what you shared. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks.